Hello, I'm Waqar Rizvi, and this is Scope. We're going to start off our show today by discussing the peace plan that was presented by Donald Trump at the White House, standing beside Benjamin Netanyahu. This peace plan is meant to resolve the issue over the occupied Palestinian territories, but will it really resolve anything? In fact, what's been happening now is a flare-up in violence. There have been Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, rockets also from Gaza into quote-unquote Israel, and there's just been heightened tensions with the Palestinian Authority also seemingly unsure of what exactly it is meant to be doing next. At this point in time, there's also news that even though Palestine has banned Israeli products and has banned them in Palestinian markets since February 3rd, Israel is now also blocking the export of Palestinian agricultural goods. So the pressure is on the Palestinians to just accept this deal. Now, anyone who has seen the map that was released by the White House would have a very hard time believing that this is a viable solution in any shape or form. It's very hard to understand how exactly and who exactly came up with this plan and thought that this would actually be something that the Palestinians can accept, though many people are pointing out the fact that these are plans that have been rehashed from older plans that have already been rejected in the past by Palestinians as well. Let's discuss all of that a bit further. We're joined now by Akram Al-Sattari, who is the head of International Relations Department at Sawaid Association for Relief and Development. He's joining us from Gaza. Also joining us from Gaza is Basem Naim, who is a Hamas leader, International Bureau for International Relations. And joining us from Jerusalem is Daoud Kuttab, who is a journalist and columnist. Daoud, Basem, and Akram, thank you to all three of you for your time today. Basem, let me start with you if I can. What are your thoughts, firstly, about this peace plan as unveiled by Trump? Can it bring peace to the region?
Thank you very much. I think the first point to talk about is to correct the description. It is not a peace plan. It is the plan for war, for violence, for injustice, and for oppression. It is paving the way for a new escalation, not only in the Palestinian territories, but also in the whole region, because still the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian conflict with the Israelis is the main or the central conflict in the area. Therefore, the whole Palestinians united, and the majority of Arabs and Muslims around the world rejected this plan from the first moment for many reasons. As you mentioned in the introduction, it is the Palestinians have with difficulty accepted to compromise 78% of their country for the two-state solution. And now we are getting islets or Bantustans separated from each other, which is 100% not viable, impossible to form an independent, sovereign or a viable state.
Daoud, I wonder what your thoughts are on, because, Jared Kushner, as well as Netanyahu and others, have been pushing the point of economic advantages. That's, I'm sure, something that you've heard of, but it seems to be the word of the day, that if the Palestinians accept it, their economy will do amazingly well. Will that be enough to convince the Palestinian peoples?
Well, no. The premise of this plan is that the conflict is over, Israel won, and the Palestinians have to accept whatever Israel is offering. Basically, they're saying, just go, get with it, accept whatever we're giving you, and have your lives better. And it basically saying might is right, that if you are powerful and if you win, even against international law, then you can keep whatever you win. And it's actually a violation of a post-World War II understanding in the world, that you cannot, it's inadmissible to take land by war. And if this is allowed, any conflict in any country or any region in the world, basically if one side is powerful, they take over other people's land, and they say, look, this is a reality, we're the powerful ones, we took the land, and you have to accept our decision. So this is a huge problem. Secondly, the idea that it's an economic problem is not fair. I mean, Palestinians, they're not looking to improve their economic daily life while ceding their religious and national rights. And so that is totally unacceptable, that you can bribe people with money and it's actually not their own money. They're bribing us supposedly with the loans from Arab countries. It's a joke. It's a real joke.
All right, so Basem, let me cut to you, because the narrative, Basem, has always been that Palestinians reject peace. That's what at least is being spoken about a lot in mainstream media. Jared Kushner has already warned about that when he's talking about the Palestinians, about this peace plan. Do Palestinians reject peace?
Let me, in short, talk a little bit about the question you have directed to other guests.
Sure.
Our conflict here is not an economical conflict. It is a conflict about sovereignty, freedom, and dignity. We are not fighting or struggling for improving the conditions of the prison. We are looking for a freedom and getting out of this prison. Jerusalem is not a deal. The holy places is not a deal. Unfortunately, we are dealing with a new administration in America which have no idea except about deals and business and money. They have no idea about other values in the human life. Therefore, it is fully rejected as an economical vision. And if you follow up the Palestinian intifada and revolutions along the last few decades, you will find that in many cases the general economical conditions in the Palestinian territories was acceptable or might be better than many Arabic does. But it was always not the question of economy, of money, of daily life. It was the question of dignity, freedom, and independence and sovereignty. Regarding your question,
yes.
No, it is a clear no. First of all, read the message of 117 Senate members, bipartisan, who sent a letter to Trump today or yesterday, expressing their worries about this unilateral plan, unilateral deal, which paved the way for violence and escalation, which is violating greatly the international law and the American vision towards this solution for the last decades by all former presidents, which was based on the two-state solution and coexistence, based on the accepted international law and borders. Palestinians have compromised around 78% of their historical Palestine in order to get at the end a viable, independent, sovereign state with Jerusalem as the capital and reserving the right of refugees to return to their homeland, which is also guaranteed by the international law and have been implemented by many people around the world.
Okay, so let me bring in Akram. Do you think that the situation as it stands right now can actually be impetus for all Palestinian factions to actually unite as well? Because that seems to now be the effort on the part of the Palestinian Authority as well. How important is it for all Palestinians, regardless of their political affiliations, to now unite as one group so that they can then, stand up to this plan as we've understood they want to?
Well, as a matter of fact, a delegation from Fatah that is supposed to be represented in the different PLO factions came to Gaza, I think last night, in an attempt to discuss different things with the Hamas leadership and with other factions leadership. There seems to be some attempts underway to reunite all the Palestinians. The most recent I would say economic measures that were taken by the Palestinian Authority indicate that there is some reconsideration of the political position and the security commitments of the Palestinian Authority that were all agreed upon with the Israelis as part of the peace talks more than 2 decades now. And popularly, there is an increasing demand and comprehensive call from the community for all Palestinian factions to reunite, because Palestinians believe that this, what is being called the deal of the century, is a very critical and dangerous attempt to undermine the legitimacy of the Palestinian quest toward an endeavor towards freedom and dignity. Whatever is being offered now is nothing. People wonder what would America do next, because they expect after that a blatant declaration of the ignoring their rights, America is going to condone and accept easily following steps sometime soon, maybe that will include annexation of the Jordan Valley and more control over the settlement blocks on the West Bank. So Palestinians believe, most of them I would say, that they have to unite, and the question remains, how far can the PLO and Fatah as the partner in the peace talks, how far can they go for the sake of stopping that greed and for the sake of fighting for what they think is the most critical fight in the history of Palestine?
Daoud, the reason I brought up, the unity amongst all Palestinian factions is because of the fact that we know that Palestinians weren't even really a party in these talks or the formation of this plan in any way, shape, or form. I mean, there was no Palestinian input, to the best of my knowledge, at least, and there was no Palestinian presence even at the White House when this plan was being presented. So, in the sense, do you think that, as you had put in your first answer, where might is right, and sure, we can argue that that is an incorrect attitude altogether, but then it would strengthen the Palestinian hand significantly to have unity throughout their political groups, at least when it comes to this issue, so that they can then have some, strength when they're talking to the Americans or the Israelis?
There's no doubt that Palestinians have two strengths and two assets that they need to really hold on to. The fact that they are present on the ground, and that is a very powerful asset that they, if used properly, they can wield a lot of power, because Israel will have to either annex all of the West Bank and Gaza and then give equal rights, or there will be an apartheid state. Otherwise, they have to give up and have two-state solution. So the first asset is actually presence on the ground. The second asset, which is missing now, is the unity, and there is no unity right now. And there was an idea that there will be elections that would help move the unity needle. Some say that there should be unity before elections. Some say that actually the elections can basically pave the way for unity. And then we had this U.S. Surrender dictate that is forcing everybody to unite. And as the previous speaker in Gaza said, there is delegation now from the West Bank visiting Gaza to prepare for a national unity conference in which Mahmoud Abbas is supposed to attend for the first time ever in Gaza. So things are moving in that direction thanks to the Israelis and the Americans for helping us unite. It's unfortunate that we needed that. We should have been united before that, and we could have prevented or at least weakened this issue. But certainly it's better late than never, and we do need this unity very badly. You're right.
All right, we'll have to leave there as a final word. Time has gotten the best of us. We appreciate, though, all three of our guests for joining us. That was Daoud speaking to us from Jerusalem, and Basem and Akram, who were speaking to us there from Gaza. We just touched the tip of the iceberg. I know when it comes to this issue, there's a lot to discuss when it comes to the plan that has been presented and how Palestinians are rejecting it. The Israelis want to, of course, move forward gung-ho when it comes to settlement building, annexing, all of the above, though Jared Kushner has, at this point in time, at least seemingly asked the Israelis to hold off on doing that. Violence is flaring, though, across the occupied territories at this time, according to all reports. The death toll is increasing, especially, of course, on the Palestinian side, as it has always in such situations. With the unity now seemingly on the horizon between all Palestinian factions, will that now be then enough to strengthen the Palestinian hand in some fashion? The Arab League and others have also rejected this peace plan, even though the Israelis had thought that the Arab League and other Arab countries would actually accept this, but that does not seem to have gone the way that the Israelis had wanted it to. What then happens in the coming days? What is the next move by Donald Trump? What is the next move by Netanyahu? And then what is the next move by Palestinians, most importantly? We'll keep a close eye on that here in Scope. I'll be back with my next segment after this. Welcome back, viewers. You're still here in Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi. In this segment of today's show, we're going to discuss a statement that came out from Iran's envoy to Iraq, Iraj Masjidi. He has said that his country would like to resolve issues with perceived rivals, such as Saudi Arabia and the UAE, quote, as quickly as possible. This was a statement that he made in an interview with an Iraqi news agency. We all know, of course, the tensions between Iran as well as Saudi Arabia and the UAE very well. This statement now comes, of course, after Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, was assassinated on Iraqi soil, and then the ensuing Iranian retaliation also on Iraqi soil, and the tensions that has brought forth within the region also at this time. So is this a good time, actually, for these countries to come to some sort of an agreement, to agree to disagree even, possibly? Because I would imagine that it's impossible to try to get them to agree on everything. But nevertheless, can all of the above in the region start to just get along a bit better than they have so far? Let's discuss that a bit further. We're joined now by Tohid Asadi, who is a researcher at the Department of Political Science at the University of Zurich. He's joining us now from Zurich. Joining us from Doha in Qatar is Zeidon Al-Kinani, who is a political analyst and writer. He specializes in geopolitics and identity politics with a primary focus on Iraq and the Middle East. Zeidon and Tohid, thank you both for your time today. Tohid, let me start with you. What do you make of the Iranian ambassador's statement that Iran is looking to resolve issues with Saudi Arabia and the UAE?
Well, first and foremost, I think what we heard from Iranian ambassador to Iraq is very clear indicative of Iranian foreign policy, which is based upon friendship and close ties with regional countries. And this is a kind of foreign policy that Tehran has been following for the past decades. But the thing is that the possibility for such a circumstance in which we have peaceful relations and then cooperations between regional countries is highly dependent on the foreign policy behavior of other countries as well.
So what if, Tohid, if I may just come in for a moment, what do you think then of those countries' complaints about Iranian actions in the region? I mean, that should also be taken into account, right? Because if we are going to have all these issues resolved, then Iran will also need to take a step towards them, right?
Well, I think when it comes to talking about Iranian actions in the region, I personally consider it a reaction to all these interventionist approaches coming from outside the region, which makes Iran responsible for going and reacting to the circumstances that are on the ground. So the key point of concern in this regard is that if we want to have peace and if we want to have a peaceful Middle East, the basis is, first of all, to stop foreign interventions, and then there should be an opportunity to sit and talk, and then even, as you said, to agree to disagree. But before that, it is not going to be possible. So what Iran is doing and what Iran is trying is basically to, first of all, provide the ground for existence of a peaceful Middle East, which is first and foremost based upon elimination of foreign forces in the region. And then there would be a possibility for talk and discuss on this matter.
Zeidon, what are your thoughts on it? I mean, as I put to Tohid as well, it's hard to imagine all of these countries agreeing on everything, right? That's not going to happen, certainly. But can they at least agree to disagree and get along a lot better than they have so far?
Well, first of all, I think we have to consider that there's a gap between how the Saudis and the Emiratis would approach Iran and how they want to restore the relations. We've noticed a more softer approach coming from the UAE side recently, which didn't align with the Saudi approach to isolate or have to worsen the relationship or the relations with Iran. So there's a gap between Saudi and the UAE. So when Iran approaches the Gulf states, it's approaching different states, it's approaching different governments and different politicians with different strategies. Of course, and a lot of times they do have a collective aligned approach towards Iran, but also, as we've seen recently, they do disagree on how to approach Iran. I would disagree with your guest on one point regarding Iran's action in the regions. And the Iranian actions in the region is not based on only reactions. Of course, there could be a lot of reactions, but I don't think there would be any justification to its actions in Iraq, for example. Iraq is a vulnerable country that Iranian regional expansionism took an advantage of after the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq. And that takes us back to the whole idea, to the topic of our show today, is that Iraq is not in a position to mediate between Iran and other countries in the region. In fact, Iraq is a country that needs to restore its relations with Iran. The relationship between Iran and Iraq today is very problematic. the Iranian involvement in Iraqi politics and domestic affairs is very problematic. So I think the Iranian government needs to reconsider its relationship and relations and involvement in Iraq before it considers Iraq to be a mediator between other countries in the region or in the Gulf.
But Zeidon, on that point you just made there at the end, Iraq sort of doesn't really have a choice at this point in time, right? I mean, in the sense that the assassination of Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi Mohandes took place on Iraqi soil, then the Iranian retaliation took place on Iraqi soil. So Iraq is sort of in this mess, whether it likes it or not?
Yeah, but it was forced to be into that mess. So the killing of Soleimani was a U.S. military operation on Iraqi soil, targeting an Iranian general, which they succeeded. So this is a U.S.-Iran conflict or dispute going on Iraqi soil. I don't think having better relations with Saudi Arabia and the UAE is going to decrease the U.S. Hegemonic actions towards Iran on Iraqi soil. We both know as much as Iran and the U.S. might find a lot of common indicators and interests in Iraq, they're currently trying to orchestrate this whole dispute: who's going to take over Iraq or who's going to control Iraqi economy, Iraqi politics, and so on. Now it might have minimized a bit than it was in the early stages after the killing of Soleimani. But again, I don't think opening up and having better relations with Saudi Arabia and Iran is going to calm things down between the U.S. and Iran in the short term.
Okay, so Tohid, do you think it's unfair of Ambassador Masjidi to think that Iraq can actually, at this point in time, mediate between Iran and Saudi Arabia and the UAE? I mean, considering Iraq is in the middle of all this, right? And it's still very much a country which is trying to build itself up. There's still major security concerns, etc. I mean, there's a lot going on in Iraq. Is Iraq in a position really to mediate? I mean, is Iran depending too much on Iraq to be able to do this? Why not just do it directly?
Well, I'll answer to that question, but prior to that, let me just add a couple of sentences in response to your previous guest's comments. There is a huge amount of difference when it comes to Iran's presence in Iraq compared to that of the United States in the same country. We know that even if Iran has kind of military presence in Iraq, it is with green light of the official legitimate government of that country, which is not really fair to juxtapose it with that of the United States, which is basically an intervention and an invasion in nature. So this could be interpreted in the context of regional cooperation in order to kind of go against a same security concern that exists. So all in all, what I can tell you is that there are shared interests and there are shared security threats between the two countries, which causes for further cooperations between the two countries. It shouldn't be, let's say, resembled to other kinds of things that exist in the Middle East. But back to your question, well, when it comes to the possibility of mediation, I think prior to any discussion about the concept of mediation, we need to just pay close attention to the foreign policy behavior of those countries that we are discussing. One of the challenges that exist is that the foreign policy of that country is not that much dependent. So it is independent. It is highly dependent upon U.S. foreign policy and upon the orders that they have receiving from the Washington. So they have very good and close relations with the United States. It's not a credible claim to put forth that having good relations with the United States is something bad. It has got some advantages. It has got some disadvantages. The advantages that you're going to have artificial security for being called a quote-unquote call for being milked. With all due respect, this is not my statement. This is what we hear from Washington. And the disadvantage is that you need to cope with all these interventionist foreign policy and military behavior that the United States is following in the region. So either you like it or not, you are considered a person cooperating, a country cooperating with a country that has come from far, far away to start invasions in Iraq, to start invasions in Afghanistan, to start invasions in Yemen, and so far and so forth. So if you have close relations with this kind of country, per se, it's going to develop kind of challenge. And it's going to naturally affect your foreign policy behavior with your neighboring countries, which are sincerely looking for having close relations, regional cooperations, which is going to be for the benefit of collective security in the region.
Okay, so let me get a final word from you and before I let go of both of you. When it comes to the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, one of the things that came out from that, I believe it was the UAE that gave a muted statement when that incident occurred. And I think that there was a concern, right, on the part of all of the above countries, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE, about regional security at that point, because right after the assassination, everyone was waiting with bated breath to see what the Iranian reaction would actually be, and if we were actually going to then enter into another world war, as as the most negative and pessimistic points of view were saying. Do you think that there's now a realization that there does need to still be this outreach to Iran on the part of Saudi Arabia and the UAE as well? And possibly that may have begun with the assassination of Soleimani?
Well, of course, the more approach, the better relations, the better negotiations that would happen between the countries in the Gulf, whether it's between Iran and Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It's for the better of the region and for the better of the regional stability. But it is very hard to try to rebuild or reconstruct a relationship with a country where you have very prominent issues and conflicts that you're disagreeing on. Iraq is unfortunately one of those political playgrounds or arenas that they heavily disagree on. Therefore, using that arena as a mediator between them two makes it very confusing and problematic, because that makes you ignore one issue and try to solve another issue, which is less important than that. And Iraq is a much more complex situation in 2020, than the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran. But going back to the points made by your guest regarding the Iranian military involvement or presence in Iraq is welcomed by the Iraqi government. Well, the U.S. invasion was also welcomed by this very same Iraqi government that the U.S. invasion installed. And this is one of the main reasons why people are protesting today in Iraq, alongside unemployability, sectarianism, the security, water crisis. It's one of the major issues that drove people to go on the streets. Because the Iranian military presence in Iraq, is because of the U.S. military presence in Iraq, which is welcomed by the Iraqi government in Baghdad. People are not happy about it. If the Iranian government or the Iranian side sees it as a cooperation, which I am shocked that they do, if they do, for Iraqis, they find it as an indirect invasion. Having a military presence of another state within your own state is problematic, and it's even more problematic when those militias are controlling the political scene in your country. When that country is using those militias for their proxy interest in Iraq, reaching to the level that they would even get involved in on whom would be the prime minister of Iraq. I don't see that as a cooperation. I see that as a destabilization, as a meddling into another country's affairs, and just to expand.
All right, Zeidon, I'm going to cut you off. I do apologize. It's just the clock has gotten the best of us. But we do, of course, appreciate both yourself and Tohid for your time today and for, of course, providing your points of view. Because this, viewers, goes to show, of course, that the issues that we're talking about when it comes to the Middle East and any form of resolution possibly or agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia or the UAE and other countries in the region is complex. Be it because of all of the above's involvements and their points of view on different regional issues. These are complex issues to discuss, but we've tried to give you both points of view, which is important for everyone to understand, because the Iranian point of view is just as important as the Saudi point of view, as just as important as the Emirati point of view, because all of the above have to get along and live in the same region right beside each other as neighbors and regional countries. So there needs to be talks at some level. Can Iraq, though, play a mediation role at this point in time, considering it is very much dealing with its own issues and has said over and over again that it does not want to be part of any of these regional squabbles or even extra-regional squabbles. We're talking about the U.S. and its assassination of Qasem Soleimani and then the Iranian retaliation to that. Iraq doesn't want to be in the middle of all this. So why is this being placed on Iraq's shoulders? Why aren't these regional countries being able to get along or even just agree to disagree, as I put to our guests as well? I'll be back with my final segment after this. Welcome back, viewers. You're still here on Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi. There's a lot to discuss in this segment about U.S. politics. There have been those debates, Democratic debates, that is, about who will become the Democratic candidate to stand up against Donald Trump this November on those presidential elections. However, there's a lot more also going on, isn't there? Trump has fired 2 witnesses, high-profile witnesses, who had spoken in his impeachment probe in the U.S. House, sparking essentially accusations that he is on a campaign of revenge. I mean, there's really no other way to put that, right? And then on top of that, there's also been that article, that scathing article in the New York Times by Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio. He's a Democrat, who has said that his Republican colleagues have told him privately that they're actually afraid of speaking the truth when it comes to Donald Trump, even though they do feel that he is unfit for office. This is, of course, all hearsay. I mean, he doesn't actually quote anybody directly. Nevertheless, it's caused, a bit of shockwaves throughout the political spectrum in the U.S., seemingly that Republicans are just too scared. Are they really that scared of Donald Trump that they wouldn't speak out, that they wouldn't speak the truth? Or is this just Republican unity with Donald Trump, that they possibly just agree with him? As we know at this point in time, the polls don't lie. Republicans support Donald Trump overwhelmingly. The numbers don't lie at this point in time. Let's discuss all of that a bit further. We're joined now by Jim Williams, who is a 7-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, Washington Bureau Chief for LJC Media and Genesis Communications. He's been covering the Democrat debates at this point in time, with New Hampshire just around the corner. He's joining us now from Washington, D.C. Joining us from Istanbul is Onur Erim, who is the president of Dragoman Strategies. He's political advisor, author, and he's worked in the White House during the Clinton administration. Onur and Jim, thank you both for your time today. Onur, let me start with you. What do you make of the current climate when it comes to Donald Trump and his vengeance, essentially, now that this impeachment trial is over? He seems to be on a battle path, doesn't he?
You know what? Everything seems to be working in his favor when it comes to this whole ordeal with impeachment. In our comments months ago, I said if this impeachment doesn't go through, it's going to boost up Trump's numbers so much. We could see a record in the 2020 elections in his favor. Right now, he's just riding the wave as that was very much somewhat presented to him, and he played it very good. And now he's trying to milk it out as much as he can, so to speak, to be honest with you. Right now, everything working in his favor, especially what Democrats do. I mean, even this article by the senator in New York Times, it's actually going to, I'm afraid, work in his favor. Let's not forget, he does have a solid support from his vote base that made him the president. And that base is not weaker, it's stronger. And now he's just adding on with all this, impeachment ordeal that didn't end that did end this in his favor. Yeah. And of course, he's going to take this and run with it, and nobody else is going to be able to stop him with this impeachment ordeal from now on. So if Democrats continue on referring to the impeachment, they're only going to get hit more and more by Trump.
All right, so Jim, that's a very good point that Onur, right? Because it seems that Democrats seem to have just made Donald Trump stronger in some way, haven't they? Whatever they've tried to do to hurt him. Do you think that whoever the candidate is in 2020 for the Democrats in these elections, that he or she will really be able to actually put up a fight against Donald Trump, who has come out a lot stronger, at least for his own base and his own party at this point?
Well, you have to remember 2 things. One, depending upon who that candidate is, they can make the case that Donald Trump has been bad for this country. Okay, that's an easy case to make. You're fighting a Bond villain in this case. All right, this guy is, this guy gets powerful. He seeks vengeance. He proved it this week that you cross him and you're in trouble with him. Okay, but he is open to gaffes. He only won the election via the Electoral College by about 80,000 votes last time in over 5 key states. The Democrats have to make a compelling argument as to what it is that they can do to make life better And it really is going to be decided by if the Democrats can motivate what is called the Obama coalition, which is basically the black voters, the Latino voters, and most of the immigrants in this country. If they can do that, as well as bring women on board, they can beat them. But they have to have a coherent message.
Do you think, going back to that article of Senator Brown in New York Times, that he has a valid point, that possibly even the Republican Party and Republican lawmakers are coming to the realization that Donald Trump may just be a bit too powerful at this point in time, in the sense that he may be able to get away with a lot more than they're even comfortable with?
I'm sure I agree with him. But then, you have to realize this is who Trump is, and this is who Trump was. Trump never claimed to be anything else besides from what he's portraying right now. So it's easy for him to keep doing this because nobody can claim that, hey, this is not what you portrayed, before the 2016 elections, or even 20 years before that. This is what mostly first New Yorkers, then the rest of the country. This is how everybody knows Trump. Trump did not really switch characters. So yes, I agree with what he says, but could this be used against him? I'm very doubtful, because again, if you beat up on this point to beat up on Trump, you're just going to play into his hands, because he's going to say, that's okay, that's fine, that's a good point, but this is who I've been for the last 70 plus years. So it's not a good argument. I do agree with your other guest that, first of all, everybody's beatable in politics. But to choose the right person, and for that person to be able to, consolidate everybody to be able to win Trump, is that possible in this rather short time? That's a big question mark. We don't see a big name, showing a snowball effect against, running against Trump. But nevertheless, you never know. Politics is a very funny thing. As a very favorite political code in Turkey, lot of things change in 24 hours in politics. So we'll see.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk, Jim, about these people who have been fired, essentially, right? So we've had the ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, who has been recalled at this point in time. We've had Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who's also been fired, essentially. He was walked out of the White House, literally, which was quite shocking to many people. Is this the new norm now in Washington, where the president has such powers? And then what does that then mean for anybody who comes into the White House? Because, it's easy to just rail on Donald Trump and say, oh, it's Trump and he's acting like a mafia boss, or however you want to term that. But then, in some ways, the system is allowing for him to get away with this, isn't it?
Well, the system is allowing him to get away with it because the people in the Senate, led by Mitch McConnell, have basically ceded it to him. And so if you look at, you're showing on the screen there, the East Room of the White House, right? When he did his 62-minute diatribe the other day, basically it was a revenge call. It was like a clarion call to anybody who crossed it. And so, yes, could this be a Democratic president who comes in and says, you know what? I think everything that Trump has ever did has to be redone, and I'm going to get rid of him, or I'm going to pursue Trump once I'm elected president. I'm going to investigate him. And this is third world stuff. And suddenly here we are slapped in the middle of it. And look, what Omar said before was a good point. But that being said, in 2008, nobody knew who Barack Obama was. Okay. Prior to that, in 92, we both, I guess, covered Clinton. Nobody knew who he was. Okay. If you have a message, if you connect with the voters, you can make it work, even if you're not. But you can't play Trump's game. I agree with that. You have to play your game and play it hard. And if you can do that, because right now a lot of people in this country are quite fearful of what would happen with a second term of Donald Trump. Indeed. So, at this point in time, it's it's a very, very interesting way, but we have to run our elections to get it through.
All right, so Onur, I'll give you the final word. Overstating it, do you think, Onur, to just think that there's loopholes within the system which need to be, those gaps need to be filled in somehow with laws, regulations, whatever, so that a president doesn't have this sort of unchecked power as Donald Trump has been able to wield, be it through, maneuvering or otherwise. But I mean, this precedent that is being set is one that I imagine future presidents, be they Democrat or Republican, will want to take advantage of too.
Rules, laws, and regulations have been written since Magna Carta. Believe me, you could write all the right laws and all the right rules and everything else, regulations. Mankind will at one point find a clever way to get around it. So it's not, in my belief, it's not really the laws or the regulations themselves, but it's how people use them, whether in favor of the public or in favor of good or just the opposite. So, are there cracks and loopholes? Of course. Will there be 100 years from now? Yes, there will. So it's who's using it and whose favor they're using it for and for what purposes is the real matter. I doubt that, as it hasn't been successful for the last hundreds of years, that you could make the best law on earth. Humankind will be clever enough to find a way to get around it.
Very well.
And use it for their own good.
Indeed. We'll leave there as our final thought. We appreciate both Onur and Jim for speaking to us and for sharing their insight with us on this, because it seems that Donald Trump at this point, actually it doesn't seem, he has come out victorious, right, when it comes to the impeachment trial or even really the Russia collusion case in some cases. Democrats or whoever, who supports them or supported the trial and the collusion case or otherwise may have wanted to hurt Trump in some fashion or to at least hurt his chances of being reelected this year or towards the end of this year, but have they actually helped him? Have they actually given him more fodder and more impetus and more strength going into these elections? And then do they then have an opposing candidate who is just as strong and is able to give an argument which then convinces independents or even really Republicans who might be on the fence right now about Donald Trump, something to think about and possibly convince them to cross over. If Republicans really are scared, as Senator Brown has said, that too is worrying, isn't it? Where the Republicans might realize that their party's president is doing something wrong, but they're just too afraid to speak out because he'll come after them like a mafia boss. He'll be vengeful, as he has towards Ambassador Sondland and Lieutenant General that I spoke about, who's just been walked out of the White House recently. Is that really something that anyone wants to play with? Do they want to play with their political careers, considering Donald Trump can really hurt them now that he is in the White House at this point? We'll keep a close eye on that, of course, here in Scope. I'll leave it there for now, though. I've been Waqar Rizvi. Thanks for watching.